What's going on, guys? We are back. Another year of Snow Court Till I Die fantasy football. Great time of year. Everyone's hopes are high. Last 5 days or so, I've really just dedicated myself, so I'm now an expert. And we do have a little whiteboard in play this year. And when I say this year, I mean like 3 to 5 videos. I think some of you think I plan on having my same level of commitment to the videos throughout the year. No, I know I'm going to trail off. Everyone's on board right now, so I strike while the iron's hot. I make some good videos, then I just kind of trail off. It's really just a matrix of the two things that matter: your intelligence, and not really like your actual, your cognitive ability. It's just your managerial aptitude, your managerial aptitude, and your luckiness. We're going to put a bunch of data points on there to just sort of, it gets the point across of like who's really been overachieving for their actual managerial skills and who's been underachieving. We're going to go over, I thought it would be fitting, since the first and the last auction winner, the same guy, the God King Aiko, we're going to go over how he's progressed as a fantasy football player. Was it pure luck last year? Is he the real deal? What's going on with Aiko? Another thing is the commitment level of everyone. No one's commitment will ever match like 2010 to 2014 ratio level of commitment. That's not even in play. Like, you guys don't know. You just don't really understand what went into those championships. Quickly touch on where everyone's head is at coming into the season, because as with all great things in life, it ebbs and it flows. So this year, maybe you just had a kid, maybe you're moving across the country, maybe life's taking a front seat, fantasy football's taking a back seat. Let's just see where everyone's at. Let's check in a little bit. We're going to go in reverse order of standings last season. So we're going to start with Westelli and we're going to end with the God King. And I'm going to work God King in as much as possible this year because he's really the storyline. He stole the show last year, and I think he's back. His commitment level seems pretty high. But let's go on to Westelli. Had a real down year last year, 5-8. Where does he slot in on this matrix? So he's not smart. He's not a top tier manager, but he is savvy. Him and Lou have a lot in common. They're not smart. They have a little bit of football know-how. So I would put them more in the savvy category than the smart category. And obviously, off the charts on the lucky meter. So King's going to go right about here. I don't think you can argue with that. And next up we have Hoot, who for some reason I should go by regular season. No, final standings. Okay, so Hoot must have beat King in the playoffs that don't actually matter. But he is for some reason ahead of King in the standings last year. Went 4-9, put up abysmal points. Low points by about 3,000. 4-9. This is all relative. So is Hoot the dumbest in the league as far as managerial skills go? You know what? I think he is. And he's also not that lucky. He might just be maxing out bottom left. He's not the most unlucky, but he's pretty unlucky too. Okay, so that's Hoot. Then we have House Togarian. I think he needs a name change this year. He's had, I think, about 3 or 4 different names throughout the course of the league, and House Togarian, it's over. We're over House Togarian. There's 2 types of teams. You have the teams like Randy Ratio, Zittage's Mysteries, Team AAA. They are esteemed in tradition. You could never change their name. It's not even a thought that crossed my mind. Although it did cross my mind this year, but it was fleeting. It was a real quick thought. I was like, maybe I could just do something wild and really change it up. But no, we're a tradition team. I've made the decision. We're always going to be Randy Ratio. House Togarian could use a change, could use a refresh, maybe change the colors up, new uniforms, do something. Finished 6-7 last year, put up pretty poor points, but not terrible. Overall, just like a kind of a meh season for Toe. We've come to expect it, though. Now, Toe is one of the better managers. As much as I hate to admit it, he has some out there takes, and he sticks to them. You're not going to change his mind, but he knows what's happening. He generally has a good pulse on what's going on. He can do math. He understands the mathematics of the draft, what players are valued at. Toe's pretty smart. And he is not the most unlucky, but he's not super lucky either. So we got Toe down bottom right. Pretty good spread so far. Next up, we have Zell, Team AAA, one of the historic traditions of the league. And he maxes out the charts on the luck factor. He's also pretty smart, but he doesn't really put that towards being a good fantasy football manager. He knows his football. He knows his players. He kind of plays favorites a lot, like he drafts Vikings, Lions all the time. Not a great manager. And his luck has definitely worn off a little bit lately, but you can't really argue with 8 consecutive seasons of having LaDainian Tomlinson just auto-drafted on your roster. Next up, we really have the team everyone wants to be, the man that made this league what it is today, completely took it to another dimension. In a man's life, he has a few periods of just intense creation and perseverance and passion. And 4 of those years were put into this league by one man. That's me. Really just took the league to a completely new level, made it what it is today. You're welcome. Obviously, off the charts smarts, off the charts lucky too. I hate to admit it, but I think I've lost 1 or 2 playoff games. Like, my playoff winning percentage is really just, a couple standard deviations outside of the norm. That's where we're going to slot in at. Next up, we have Zidic's Mysteries, one of the real just tragedies of the league. It's like a Shakespeare play, a real sad state of affairs over there. He keeps on getting back up. You can't really fault him. He puts in the reps. It's only a matter of time, you would have to imagine, before Zidic finally gets the elusive title. Definitely unlucky. Some of it is self-inflicted. I remember distinctly he did choose being cool over fielding a playoff squad 1 year, and that was maybe the pivotal year that's kind of led to all this. Karma, echoes through eternity, all that type of stuff. That was one moment that Tarek took his hands off the wheel, and the fantasy gods have really never let him forget it. So that's where Tarek's slotting in. Another thing with Tarek is he's kind of like a book smart nerd where, like, when it's under pressure, panic pick Randy Moss, it doesn't really translate into the draft. I feel like he's leaving a little bit on the table. He's a practice player. He has to get more game ready. Next up, we have Team Borg, and I really don't know what to make of Borg. I mean, he obviously walks in like he runs the place. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. For that reason, I feel like a component of smartness and drafting ability is a little bit of self-awareness, which maybe Borg lacks, but I don't know. It's really hard to do like a psychoanalysis of Borg. Maybe there's an actual human being deep down in there somewhere. I think Borg overall has gotten like slightly more lucky than unlucky, and he's middle of the road. I'm going to put him slightly dumb, though. Next up, we have Elway, mixing it up. One of the name changers in the league. He's been around for a long time. He had an era. It was a little bit after my peak fantasy production era. There was an Elway that came out of the woodwork like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and he reeled off like, I think, 2 or 3 playoff appearances. He lost. That's what it was. He lost to me maybe twice in the finals. I can't remember exactly, but Elway did have a peak. At the time, it wasn't just like sort of a fluke type of a thing. Like, he was making tactical decisions and he had draft strategies. I feel like he hasn't been doing that as much lately. Obviously, he's one of the perennial underperformers. I think if you go by winning percentage, he's definitely on the low end. Elway has the potential to be somewhere like right in here on the smartness scale, but he's definitely going to end up on the dumb scale. And I don't have a strong take on Elway's luck, but I think he's a little unlucky. Then we have Ligma Chapman, another one of, he really brings a lot to the league. There's a lot of bad things you can say about Chapman, but he definitely adds an element that is needed. He mixes it up. He forms factions. He's always whispering in people's ears. He's creating trade blocks so that you can veto any trade with like him, Elway, Zell. He's a guy that you got to be, this is maybe tactical. He makes you be nice to him just so he'll trade with you. I mean, 3 championships, right? Does he have 3 or does he have 2? I always forget. I think me, Chapman, and King have 3, right? Chapman has 3. Chapman has 3 championships. You cannot argue with that. Okay. So obviously off the charts on the luck meter with Chapman here. Is he luckier than King? No. It's close. It's really close. And man, like, it's tough to rate him on the dumbness to smartness scale because, like, he's really obviously a bad drafter, like terrible bottom tier drafter, but he maneuvers throughout the season. I'm going to put him a little bit on the dumb axis, but he's not as dumb as you might think. Okay, we got Chapman up there. Next up, we have Lou. He's usually pretty competitive. I feel like he's made a few playoff runs. Rarely does he just, like, bottom out and have a terrible record for the season. He's savvy. He's, along with King, they're not smart, they're savvy. Lou, though, I think is a little bit better of a drafter. He usually doesn't have, like, strong player takes. He just kind of comes in, takes value. He's very daring. So, like, early on when everyone's scared, Lou's just grabbing players for value. His luck, I think, has been about 50-50. I'm putting Lou slightly smarter than King. Next up, we have Kevo. Really, I think he's a dum-dum, but he knows a little bit about football. I feel like his takes are just too strong, and it's not really conducive to being a good fantasy football manager. I don't think he knows math at all. I don't think he understands how scoring works. I think he's just out there getting his guys and, like, having a good time. He tries hard, which is good, He's definitely going to be on the dumb scale, and I think overall he's a little bit on the lucky scale. You know what? Now that I'm seeing this, Borg's got to go dumber, because I think Kevo is smarter than Borg. And last but not least, we have the God King himself, Aiko. Coming off his second championship, just had one of the unforgettable fantasy football seasons of all time last year. I was looking at his team, the team he drafted and the team he won the championship with, almost the same team. Not a lot of big inner season moves for him. I mean, he had the most points by almost 2,000. It doesn't get too much more dominant than that performance from Aiko. Is he smart? He's really not a great drafter. I guess I would put him somewhere on the... He's definitely lucky. He's not a great drafter. It's hard to really quantify what makes Aiko. It's really just effort. He's an effort player. Like, wherever I place him, it's not really going to get across the full magnitude of what Aiko is. Aiko's going right there. That's going to be the full distribution. The league is pretty evenly split. We're a little bit smarter than we are dumb, and we're much luckier than we are unlucky, which that probably shouldn't be the case. If I had to make some adjustments, I'd probably say, I think that's a pretty good distribution, actually. Yeah, no, I think we're good. We're sticking with that. That is a good distribution of the league right there. Next up, next segment. This is running a little long, so we're going to cut to the chase. I'm just going to read through these real quick. Every manager is Patronus. Do you guys know what a Patronus is? It's from Harry Potter, Expecto Patronum, and then it summons your, like, it's a spirit animal, or like it's a protecting animal of some sort. It's a spell. And basically every person has a special creature that is their Patronum. So it's like deep inside. It's kind of like the feather inside your wand. It's tied to you in a very special way. So each manager has a player that is their Patronum. This is kind of dumb, but let's do it anyway. First thing that came to mind is what I went with here, because that's the way it should be. And let me know if you guys disagree with any of these. I might have missed some obvious ones. First off, we have Aiko, James Robinson. I'm going to go with that. The other option, obviously, was Cam Newton. Adam Vinatieri is an option, too. I think James Robinson, because it was such an epic season, you got to go with that. Kevo doesn't really have one that comes to mind, so I just went with Derrick Henry. I feel like that kind of gets the point across of what Kevo is all about. Lou, also another hard one to pin down. I went with Chris Godwin. That kind of defines Lou's whole drafting style, like Calvin Ridley, Chris Godwin, like the receivers or the running backs that don't have like an established track record, but he drafts them and then they do well. I think that's kind of Lou's guy. Chapman could have gone a lot of ways with this one. There's a lot of rookie receivers, obviously, you can go with. But the first thing that comes to mind with Chapman is when he drunkenly first overall picked Tony Romo. So I'm going Tony Romo. It was either first or second. Elway. Two options here. Kelsey, I think, is who I'm going with, or Kirk Cousins. And I don't even know that he's ever had Kirk Cousins on his team. It's just like such an Elway guy that came to mind. Borg, it's either Hopkins or Watson, of course. I think I would go Deshaun Watson. For Tarek, it's tough. There's obviously panic pick Randy Moss. Could be that. But I don't think that really gets the point across of who Tarek is. Who Tarek is he buys in hardcore on the league breaker. He likes this whole league breaker dynamic. So two examples that were big flops. Darren McFadden, that's the definitive one. He was like, Darren McFadden's totally different. He's just built different. 2,000 yards, 22 touchdowns. He's that type of guy. He'll probably catch 100 passes too. League breaker. Or Peyton Hillis, Madden curse. That I don't think he really thought Peyton Hillis was a league breaker, but that's just a funny one to throw in. I would go Darren McFadden. For me, it's got to be, I think, Dante Culpepper. The other option is Arian Foster. Those are the only two that really come to mind. I don't really have a Patronus. If I had to say, it's probably Dante Culpepper. For Toe, there's two options, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne. I think I would go Marvin Harrison just because that was more in the era where Toe was really getting his guys and he had Harrison like every year. Reggie Wayne is also viable, though. For Hooch, we got two options. It's either Mahomes or DJ Chark. And I think he's had Mahomes like 2 times, so probably Mahomes. And for King, this one I couldn't come up with off the top of my head, but I did some thinking, and I think it's pretty obviously Big Ben. I think at least 2 of his championships were with Big Ben, and he's had him a multiple times, probably at least 3 times. So those are the Patronums. Let's just close out here with a little analysis of this masterful season that Aiko had. So if we look back at the draft recap here for Aiko, he definitely played it much more standard than usual. Usually he's getting a little zany and out there with his picks, but lot of $1 boys here. Good distribution in the starting lineup. Really just hit on everything. So I think he picked up James Robinson pre-week 1 maybe. I think that was the big, obviously, money move there. Darren Waller, $9, obviously a huge pick there. Ben was fine, I think, for 17. Cortland Sutton, what happened with him? He died a little bit, I think, right? Yeah, Cortland Sutton died, actually, hard. Oh, yeah, big. Okay, so he died. So that was $22 down the tube. DJ Metcalf exceeded value, almost double probably. Mike Evans, just touchdown bonanza. The only real crazy standout, I think, was the pickup, James Robinson. And then if you look at his team here, so his week 1 starters, pretty much the exact same. Week 16, week 15, whatever. Week 15? Yeah. Almost the exact same starting lineup, which is pretty impressive. I guess that's one thing he got a little lucky with, just like none of his players got injured except for Cortland Sutton. Oh, I guess, yeah, Chase Claypool was like pretty big a few games. Yeah, man, it makes it look like very doable. I guess it's just usually you're going to miss on some of these guys, but pretty much every guy he drafted performed pretty well. Then we go back to the legendary 2011 draft. Definitely a much different draft tactic here. Much more even distribution. He only got one player for $1, and in last year's draft, he got like 8 or 9. This draft was really bad. It was obviously saved by $2 Cam Newton, legendary pick. He had like I looked at his team earlier. So AJ Green was $5, and he had like a pretty great season. Not great, but pretty good. 1,800 fantasy points. Jeremy Maclin had I guess this was his one decent season, 1,500. Had some duds. Austin Collie, I think this was when he died from concussion. Steve Johnson had a pretty good year. Nothing real crazy, though. Just everyone kind of put up numbers, and that seems to be a hallmark of Aiko's teams. Steven Jackson had a pretty great year. Rashard Mendenhall had a pretty decent, not even that good. It was really just Cam Newton. Cam Newton carried the team this year. Oh, and this was also the year that Aiko got in the playoffs at 6-7, beating out Tarek by a tiebreaker. And we can't go back to see what his week 1 starters versus his week 16 starters were. Oh, Eli Manning did pretty well too. Okay. You can really see the career arc for Aiko coming around though. He's taking it much more seriously. He's not messing around. He's not taking like $2 or $3 kickers, spending $5 on defenses, anything crazy like that. I guess there's not too much else to talk about. Just excited for the draft. Coming in hot like usual. As far as my draft readiness goes on a historical scale, obviously we're taking out the 4-year window of just peak draft readiness because that really skews the whole chart, so it doesn't make sense to compare it to that. I would say this year I'm probably at a 9. I'm at a 9 this year. I'm coming in real hot. Even though I just talked to Tarek like 5 days ago and I was like, oh yeah, what team is that guy on? I know all that stuff now. I know what team every person's on. Almost. And I'm just ready to go. I got my guys locked in. I got a few. Every year I go into the draft, I have like a few guys that I know I'm higher on than everyone else. So usually I'm just kind of crunching the numbers and being like, okay, if I can get my guy for this price, I'm happy. And I have a general sort of framework of like how much I want to spend at different positions. It's not locked in stone, but generally I'm like, okay, we're going to do 60 on quarterbacks this year, something like that, like somewhere just ballpark figures based on like the cutoffs of when it goes from being decent players to terrible players, stuff like that. That's my general strategy. So going into the votes for the rule changes, let's talk about those. Should we have the trade deadline extended? Yeah, I guess it makes sense because I feel like even now the trade deadline, I still would like to make trades a week or two after. So I think week 12 is probably good. And it adds an interesting dynamic in the last few weeks of the season because you can't make trades. Should we increase the free agent budget to 100 or 1,000? Yeah, I think it's good just because there's less ties and it just gives you like more flexibility, obviously, with the bidding. I think it's good. Required to identify yourself with vetoes. This one was just really mind-blowing to me. Why would you not want to see who's vetoing? It's crazy. Obviously, the people that veto every trade said no. I'm actually really surprised. Did Chapman vote? No, he didn't vote. I think Chapman would have also voted no. But of course, you got to see who's vetoing. This one, I was probably most upset about. You need only 5 votes to veto. I think veto should be in only extreme instances of collusion. I don't think you should veto just because one of the managers is dumb. Yeah, I just don't even like having vetoes in the game. It's kind of dumb. If you're vetoing for unfair trades, it doesn't make sense. It should only be collusion. And this one I thought was really dumb. 2-week playoffs? No. Why would we ever want 2-week finals? I think that would really it's too big of a change There are certain traditions that you don't want to mess with. A general framework for the league is like the changes should be as minimal as possible. So like overhauling the whole playoff system like this, I don't think makes sense. We got a good thing going. Don't really mess with it. Last thing for the video, manager, risers, and fallers. Who do I think is going to make a breakthrough into the upper echelon of the league this year? Maybe one of the basement dwellers who's never really performed well. Who's going to break through? And then who's kind of falling off? A lot of this just comes down to the amount of effort you're willing to put in. And I think maybe Hoot this year is going to make a breakthrough and maybe turn things around and potentially be someone who's like takes it more seriously and is competitive year in, year out. And I think there's an obvious faller this year. I haven't heard much from him in the WhatsApp chat. Haven't seen him on the message boards. I don't even know if he exists anymore. King. I think King is going to make a dramatic fall. I think Kevo over the next 5 years is going to be a better performer than King. That's pretty much it. That's the video. Hype for the season. Oh, do we got the schedule? Oh, we don't have the schedule out yet. I want to see who I play first. That's big. If you guys have different rankings for the league managers on the dumbness and the luckiness scale, let me know. That's going to do it. Year 17. Wow.